The Unfinished Legacy Part 3. The Foundation of Truth Chapter 1. The ghost of Brooklyn the morning of the 10th day greeted me not with sunlight, but with a heavy, cold fog rolling in from the Atlantic. The Sterling estate felt like a hollow cathedral, its marble floors echoing every step I took. Somewhere in the East Wing, I knew Richard and Cassandra were already meeting with their legal teams, sharpening their knives for the final kill. But my mind was miles away, anchored in a dusty industrial pocket of Brooklyn. In my leather bag lay the ultimate weapon, a rusted diskette and a weathered copy of the 1999 inspection report. I had retrieved them from my father's secret vault, hidden under a label that simply read, "The debt, Henderson had been right to be afraid." This wasn't just a corporate error. It was a crime. The report proved that the warehouse collapse wasn't caused by a design flaw from Marcus Thorne. It was caused by the concrete. My father, Thomas Sterling, had personally authorized a swap replacing high-grade building materials with cheap, substandard filler to save $3 million on the margins. When the building crumbled and 3 workers were pinned under the debris, my father panicked. He didn't just hide the truth. He used Marcus's signature on the site arrival forms to frame his best friend. He turned Marcus into a criminal to ensure the Sterling name stayed gold. "Are you really going to burn it all down, Evelyn?" Henderson was waiting for me in the study, his face gray in the dim morning light. "If these documents reach the district attorney, the Sterling Group won't just lose money. It will cease to exist. Thousands of families depend on those paychecks. Your father built this city. Do you really want to be the one to erase him?" "He erased himself the moment he signed those orders, Henderson," I replied, staring at the portrait of my father above the fireplace. The painted man looked back at me, cold and unyielding. "He didn't build this city. He cheated it. I'm not erasing him. I'm finally letting the truth breathe." Chapter 2. The boardroom battlefield. It was noon when I walked into the Sterling Group headquarters on Manhattan. The boardroom was a masterpiece of glass and steel, hovering 30 floors above the hustle of Wall Street. The air was pressurized, smelling of expensive air freshener and old power. The board of directors sat in perfect, terrifying silence. Richard sat at the head of the table, his cufflinks gleaming like armor. Cassandra sat to his right, her eyes scanning her tablet with frantic energy. "So the prodigal daughter returns for the final act," Richard began, his voice dripping with condescending confidence. "The 10 days are up, Evelyn. You played your little game. You've visited the old man in the home. Now, can we stop this nonsense? Sign the transfer papers, and we'll give you enough money to go back to your quiet life and never look back." I stood at the opposite end of the table. I didn't sit down. Instead, I opened my bag and pulled out 12 black folders, sliding them across the polished mahogany surface. "My father didn't leave me an inheritance, Richard. He left me a confession," I said, my voice cutting through the hum of the air conditioning. "Inside these folders, you will find the original purchase orders for the 1990 for Brooklyn project. You'll find the forensic audit that was suppressed 20 years ago. And most importantly, you'll find the evidence that Thomas Sterling committed perjury to destroy Marcus Thorne." The room went so quiet I could hear the faint whistle of the wind against the glass exterior. Richard's face didn't just pale. It turned a ghastly, translucent white. He reached for a folder, his hand trembling. "You're destroying your own family," Cassandra hissed, her voice cracking. "Do you have any idea what the lawsuits will do to the stock? We'll be tied up in court for a decade. We'll lose everything. We already lost everything 20 years ago." I said, leaning forward. We lost our integrity. As of this moment, as the majority shareholder under the terms of the liar's audit, I'm initiating a total restructuring. We are liquidating the luxury skyscraper projects to pay for a full exoneration of Marcus Thorne and a victim's compensation fund. If any of you want to stay on this board, you'll sign the disclosure agreement now. If not, the Dow is waiting for my call. Chapter 3. The return to the light. The fallout was more brutal than I had ever imagined. The Sterling reputation didn't just fall. It evaporated. The news cycle was relentless. The billion-dollar betrayal was the headline of every paper from New York to London. Richard and Cassandra sued me, of course, claiming I was mentally unstable. But my father had been one step ahead of them. He had left a video deposition with Henderson that confirmed everything. He had planned his own downfall through me. A month later, I made my final trip to the Gracewood Institute. I wasn't carrying a briefcase this time. I was carrying a legal document signed by the governor. Marcus Thorne was sitting in his usual spot in the garden. But for the first time, he wasn't staring at the trees. He was looking at a newspaper. His eyes were sharp, focused. The fog of his memory hadn't fully lifted, but the truth had acted like a beacon, drawing him back to reality. "Evelyn," he said as I approached. His voice wasn't a whisper anymore. It was firm. I read what happened. The warehouse ... The materials. He really did it, didn't he? Thomas really betrayed me. He did, Marcus, I said, sitting beside him. And I'm so sorry it took 20 years to find the papers. Marcus looked at the construction helmet I had brought, the original Sterling and Miller gear. He ran his hand over the dented plastic. He was always afraid of being small, you know? He thought he needed the towers to be big. He didn't realize that a man's height is measured by his word, not his skyline. We spent the afternoon talking not about the betrayal, but about the future. I told him about the new trust. He wasn't going to be a patient anymore. He was going to be a consultant. We were going to build the affordable housing project he had drafted in 1994. The project that started the fight. Chapter 4. The house on the cliff. 6 months later, the Sterling estate in Oak Ridge was officially sold. It was going to be turned into a public park and a museum of architecture. I kept nothing but a few boxes and the blue playhouse key. Richard and Cassandra were living in a modest apartment in Jersey, their empire gone, their names a footnote in a scandal. I stood on the jagged cliff overlooking the ocean, watching the waves crash against the rocks. The silence of the house was gone, replaced by the roar of the sea. I felt lighter than I had in my entire life. I had no billions, no private jets, and no board of directors to answer to. I was just Evelyn. My father had left me a legacy of shame so that I would have the courage to build a legacy of truth. He knew I was the only one in the family who hated the money enough to do what was right. In his final act of control, he had freed me. I got into my old car and looked at the map. I was heading to the construction site in the city. The foundation for the Thorne complex was being poured that afternoon. Marcus was going to be there to sign the first beam. I realized then that a building is only as strong as the ground it's built on. My father's buildings were built on sand and secrets, and they had all fallen. But this new project, it was built on the truth. And I knew, as I turned the key in the ignition, that this was the only way any of us could truly go home. As I drove away from the Sterling gates for the last time, I didn't look back in the rearview mirror. The past was settled. The audit was over. The legacy was finally finished.